Good day. I'm at Wynberg Bitterboom Civic Centre today. My name is Mr. Michael Gordon. I was born in Broader Wynberg, which originally was number 8. But as numbers got sorted out, they put even numbers on the one side. By the time I moved out of Broader Wynberg, it was then number 22 Broader Wynberg. My history from Broad Road, Wynberg, and from Wynberg, starting growing up in Broad Road, Wynberg, would be from a child. All children are very curious. I was very curious, still curious till today. We had a scrap metal in our road. It was then called chick scrap. And now I'm talking, as my memory serves me right, this is from the 60s. From early 60s, say from 1960 onwards, giving a feedback. And it was in that period of time when a lot of people got rid of old cars, fully assembled cars. They drove it into the scrap. They didn't want it anymore. Either couldn't afford it or they couldn't afford to repair it. So they would drive all these, which we call vintage today, but beautiful motor cars, which then in turn they traded it in for scrap. They got scrap money for it. So it was cut up and used for recycled steel and things like that. Sad of it today because there's so many people out there in the motor industry today that is looking for vintage cars. But I saw these things being cut up, being cut up with a cutting torch and that, and big trucks, 6 trucks would come and they would come and cut it and collect it and that. And that was one of the first experiences for me, to see people bring all sorts of old scrap in steel, copper, brass, you name it. They brought that, they traded it. So that was one business which attracted me, and memories still stay with me. Then when we go further down Broad Road, we had coming down Broad Road, that will be from the station side. So that will coming Broad Road down under the railway line. You would get chicks on the right hand side, and then diagonally opposite, where today it was, I don't think it's still there. It was called Red Cross. It was a Red Cross hospital. They did, but that originally behind there was racing horses kept. They had big stables behind it, and that area that was. And then we had a family, a very, at that point of time, we would say a well-to-do family, the Fishers. And they owned a big property right next to where the Wynberg Red Cross was, Red Cross Hospital. Right, so we go further down. Then we would come to Broad Road School, which was influential in a lot of ways because it was a school for many years. It only changed over in the later part in the apartheid era. Then it changed, and the principal that was there for many years, Mr. Pearson was his name. And then we go further down Broad Road. We would then come to everybody called it CCC, City of Cape Town Council, and that place on its own fascinated me in a big way because I loved horses from a very young age. Due to my dad was a farmer and he was so he had horses and that, and I just had a love in that. But the love also grew from watching how they looked after animals, how the council looked after their horses. And the horses that they had, I still remember, were big English Clydesdale horses. They have some other names too. Big, strong horses, big hooves, strong, broad backs, chest, strong thighs, legs, big, full-hand horses. And they would in turn pull heavy steel carts, which the carts alone weighed quite a bit. Carts with top closed areas where they would dispose the dirt into, and from that they would take it off to a drop-off point. And at that time, they covered uh, a wide area. I think right into Harfield from Wynberg. So the Wynberg depot did Harfield, and I think they turning point, and I think they went as far as Heathfield. As far as I think Heathfield Retreat. So, and they did Constantia, and they did Plumstead, and they did that. So they covered a big area. They had many horses. They had, because they used to keep the surplus of the horses, so they would divide them up, and they wouldn't use them every day, and they would keep them at the lower end of Broad Road. They would go behind Bonnytown. They had a big bonding section there where they kept the animals and where they could graze and everything. And that, at that point of time, when I do remember, that was the dumping area for Wynberg, because that's where they dumped the dirt. And that is between Youngsfield Aerodromes and Rosmin Avenue. So at the back of Bonnytown, there was a dumping place, and they would in turn go out in the mornings with the carts, big carts, and then they would collect the garbage, all household garbages. Certain days they would clean the roads and that. But what fascinated me was they had their own blacksmith, and I would always walk into the yard and go into the back where the blacksmiths were. I used to watch how they used to make the shoes, and they had their own furnace and stuff, and how they would mold it and everything, and how they would shoe the horses and all that. And they did their own servicing and repairs to the big steel carts and all that. The good point was the carts were pulled, but they were pulled on. They had rubber wheels with tubes in, so that was a great advantage in that section. Then diagonally opposite the council, that was on the left side going down from the station, we would go, there we would get called Royal Dairy, which then became Dairy Bell afterwards. And growing up in Broad Road, it was my duty always to get the milk for the family, for our family home. In those early years, many of our homes never had fridges. We were very fortunate. We had an oak tree, right? We were the only house in Broad Road. Broad Road was full of oak trees, but we were the only house in Broad Road that had its own oak tree inside its property. And that oak tree was big, and it threw a big shadow over our dining room. So I could buy the milk, and on my way, they used to have a little cardboard ring around that they used to press into the bottle, and that I could lift and take a sip on. Afterwards, they put the silver paper around it like that. But I loved milk from a young boy, so what I would do, I would bite a little chip, because some of the bottles did come for them, the handling it would have a little, and I would drop the cream a little, I would drop the level of the cream a little bit, and I would take it home, and we would leave our milk. We bought milk on a daily basis, and we would leave it in our dining room, and we would leave it in a water container, and we never lost, and our milk never went off. And that's the part of growing up in Broad Road from a very young age. And we, living in Broad Road, our entrance of our home, we entered in Broad Road, but we had access to leave the property in Perth Road. So we had entrance. We could enter from Perth Road. My dad could bring his vehicles in from Perth Road. He could park, and in Broad Road you could park cars. You could park cars right up against the pavement. It had a wide pavement, and it had off ramp from the trees to the pavement. There was a lot of space. We also then at that time, which is a factory, the building is still standing, that was called Monatic Factory. That's where they made all the clothing and things like that. They were based there. That was Perth Road, and they were based in Brisbane Road, where the bus terminus is today. That building there, that was also a part of Monatic Factory, where they made beautiful suits and a lot of different clothing, men's clothing, in all types of, a lot of clothing, which is not made today anymore, of course. And then we had two roads. From Brisbane Road, you had one, it was called, the one ran straight down, it was called Sussex Road, and the one was called Otter Road, but it came into a triangle, it ended like in a triangle, would go down. From there, I ended up going to being a Catholic and going to St. Augustine's Catholic School, where my late mother, she was a teacher there for many years. Maiden surname was Emilia. Her nickname was Bubbles Wagner, and she married my late dad. She by the name of Cummings Gordon. He was originally from Thunderstel, Somerset West. My younger sister, Geraldine Gordon, she also became a teacher and ended up lecturing in at Wesley Training College. And from there she went to Belleville Training College, and from there, when she retired, she ended up in a retirement year. She taught at St. Augustine's again till the time of passing away. And I went to school at St. Augustine's. From there I left and I went to a feeder school. At that time it was called St. Owen's in Retreat Road, and it fell under Marriott Brothers. From there onwards, being a young man full of energy, I joined a football club by the name of Batswood Football Club, which was associated to the Cape and District Football Association that still stands today. The club is still in existence. That club was started in 1929. I call back from the past of history was that Wynberg was a very safe place to live. It was actually a very beautiful place to live in the sense that we never locked doors, we never locked windows. We would most times our doors stood open till late at night. We would only lock the doors maybe when the last one came in at night. We were 6 in a family. We were a Gordon family in Broad, and we were 6 in a family. My eldest sister was Olivia, my eldest brother was John, and then I have a sister called Marlene, and then I have Geraldine, and then I come along, and then I have a younger brother, Raphael. So that's the part that I can share with you from my upbringing of Broad Road, Wynberg. There's one part that I forgot, was to tell you something, that one of the founders of the taxi, I want to call it taxi, but it was called, the early taxi, when taxi started, the taxis was run by horse and cart, so it was horses, they would have little cab carts and that, and people would get in, they would either put 2 or 4 in a different, and my late grandfather, Mr. Paul Wagner, he was one of the founders, and he was from number 19 Eden Road, Wynberg. But the rank where they ran the taxi business was from right opposite the Wynberg Town Hall. The history of that rank, it's still there, right opposite the entrance, and that's where the cobblestones are today on the ground next to the tar there, and that's where the horses and that would stand, and from there they would take trips and take people wherever they wanted to be. And that's the history that I can share with you today from my side of my family and upbringing. There's one thing that I want to bring. When they speak about the pioneers of taxation, my late uncle, his name was Johannes Paulse. Everybody knew him as Hansie Paulse. And he was one of the first and one of the very few taxi men that was allocated a rank. And his rank was at the bottom end of Castletown Road, and right at the railway line, at the subway, as you come up from Park Road, up from the lower, come up to Park Road, coming up to the railway line, right next to the fence there. That was a taxi rank for 3 taxis. And he was one of the first people to have that. At that time, taxis were run with meters. They would clock a meter and that, and then from there, your fare would be attached to that meter. How many miles? Everything worked in miles at that time. So how many miles you went, and that would give it. And then they would attach the. So when the meter went off, straight away, once that car left, the meter went on, and that meter ticked, the price would go up. So it would be so much. The longer the distance, the more the pounds it would cost you. And that. But that's the history. And he had a daughter who ran that taxi business when he passed away. He was born in 1905,